This story revolves around the terrifying incidents that took place at a poor village which was located somewhere in the mountainous area of China. The protagonist of the story is a guy named Fong. He was a good-looking young man with gentle, likable character and was always hard-working. His daily job was to go mushroom picking in the mountains and then traded the mushrooms at the market. One day, as usual, Fong went to the forest on his own. The continuous rainfall that took place recently had allowed lots of mushrooms to grow. Fong picked the mushrooms carefully, checked them one by one, and then put them in the bamboo basket on his back. Then he made his way deep into the forest. As he was walking, he suddenly smelled a heavy scent. It gently drifted through the forest breeze. Fong was quickly dazzled by the lovely scent. He looked around and decided to follow his nose. The fresh scent led him to go further into the forest. Fong was amazed to find out that the source of this beautiful scent was actually from a wild flower. But this one was different, as it was the first time in his life seeing such a strange-looking flower. It looked similar to a lotus bud, with small petals that unfolded in circles, surrounding the white bud. The flower looked pretty similar to the jasmine since it had thin petals. The pistils in the middle still had nectar on them. The heavy scent released from the flower and the aura surrounding it immediately caught the man's attention. But what amazed him the most was there was only one special flower like this one growing up in the middle of this deserted forest. Out of curiosity, Fong approached the flower. The flower suddenly gave off strong unpleasant smell that made him cover his nose and step backwards. Later he found out there were large and long roots tightly tying the small flower, as if they were absorbing all the nutrients of the small plant. As he walked along the roots, he saw a bush nearby. He approached it and found out there was something mysterious hiding behind the grooves. Curiously, he grabbed the roots and pulled them out strongly, but there was something heavy affecting them and hence prevented him from doing it. Then the man came up with an idea. He followed the roots to see where they would lead him to. The amazement within him piled up as he realized the thing in front of him was not something in the underground. Actually, it was a pumpkin that had already been withered. From the top of the vegetable appeared a long root. It was also the one that made him curious the whole time. Fong couldn't hide the disappointment mixed with a bit of surprise on his face. He kept staring at the pumpkin and wondered to himself how there could be a pumpkin that grew in such a strange way and how bizarre it seemed to him. Fong walked close to the pumpkin. He realized it had the same size of a watermelon, but there were some dark spots on it that looked like they had been rotten. He carefully checked the pumpkin, then decided to take it home and sell it at the market later, as he assumed he could sell the vegetable at a good price. Or maybe he should show it to the villagers and to find out what type of pumpkin this one was. It wasn't an everyday thing to encounter with a pumpkin like this, hence the man was curious to see what it looked like inside. He put the pumpkin in his basket and then went down the mountain. On his way he was thinking that he would do this to the pumpkin he just found. He kept thinking about it up until he left the dense forest and returned to his village. Fong headed to the market. When he showed the pumpkin to the villagers, they quickly gathered round it to take a look of it. They asked where he had found it.
Wow.
Some was amazed to learn there was a pumpkin this big growing in the forest. They looked at it in amazement. A young man among the crowd suggested to Fong to put it up for auction, but another one told Fong to be careful with the pumpkin. The forest was considered a sacred place, and there was no chance for a pumpkin like this to grow in it. One villager suggested cutting the pumpkin in half to see what was inside it. Fong agreed with the idea. He held a knife in his hands and was about to cut it in the presence of the villagers. Suddenly a male voice came out from behind saying, "Stop it! Do not cut the pumpkin!" The villagers turned around. It was an old man standing at the end of the queue. Fong was surprised to the man's remark. He asked, "Why not cut the pumpkin?" The old man spoke in a sacred manner. "This spooky pumpkin has been cursed." The villagers talked to each other in a tumult of confusion. What if the old man was speaking the truth? Then Fong had brought bad luck to the villagers. Feng was extremely annoyed by what the old man had told him. He snapped at the man, saying what he just said was nonsense. The old man remained calm to Feng's anger. He looked at him and said that the pumpkin was not that normal and harmless as it might seem. Everybody was amazed to hear it. They asked how they could know the pumpkin was not normal. The old man recollected everything. He told the villagers a story that had happened to him years ago. In the old days, when the war broke out, the Japanese fascists had brutally killed off people in the forest. They tied up people who opposed them with a long rope and made them line up horizontally in front of the gun barrels. Then the commander would order the soldiers to shoot at them. After the noises of gunshots, blood was seen spilling everywhere. The scene was horrific and terrifying. The souls of those who tragically died at the forest were still there. They turned into blue balls of flame, wandering around the forest, therefore making the atmosphere at the place always gloomy and cold. The souls were sent to a wildflower since they were absorbed into it. The flower was very different from others. It was spooky and ghostly. As time passed by, from the spot of the wildflower grew a pumpkin, and it was the one that Feng brought home today. Actually, they were elsewhere in the forest that had white flowers like it. The villagers were scared as they listened to the old man. Some told Feng not to cut the pumpkin as they believed what he said was true. But the young men in the village didn't think that way. They assumed it was just a made-up story of the old man to scare villagers. The contradictory ideas from two sides quickly caused fierce quarrels to break out. The atmosphere started becoming tense and noisy, which made Feng extremely annoyed. At that moment, the group of young teenagers was behind Feng. They challenged him to cut the pumpkin open. The old man tried to talk him out of doing it. Then he turned around and walked away, yet not forgetting to say something before leaving. "One day you will regret for what you have done today." The old man's words kept echoing on his mind. He stayed silent and felt bewildered. However, out of curiosity, he decided to cut the pumpkin open. As he reached to a sharp knife, he looked at the pumpkin placed on the wooden cutting board. Without hesitation, the man cut the pumpkin with a great force. It immediately split in half, and a terrifying scene happened before the villagers' eyes. Blood inside the pumpkin splashed everywhere following the cut. The villagers were scared to death to see the scene. There was nothing but blood inside the pumpkin. Blood was spilling everywhere on Feng's body. Some couldn't even stand the fishy smell and had to cover their noses. The villagers blamed everything on Feng. They accused him of bringing ghosts to the village, and he had to be held responsible for it. The villagers left after the incident. They left him standing there in bewilderment. That morning, the villagers had been scared out of their wits. They locked the doors as soon as they got home, not daring to go out due to the fear for encountering ghosts. And the horror had happened. That night, Feng couldn't sleep as he felt a burning pain all over his body. Despite not being scratched by anyone, pieces of his skin was peeled off and fell onto the floor. The smell of blood was all over his body. Feng felt itchy and extremely painful. It felt like there was some kind of invisible force slowly torn apart his layers of skin. In just a blink of an eye, the skin on the lower half of his face had been removed. Under the dim light, Feng got off his bed and took heavy steps. Feng was so scared and ashamed of his look. He covered up his face and went to the old man's house asking for his help. He assumed the old man must know something about the white flower and the pumpkin, and know how to cure this obscure disease. If the villagers found out about Feng having this rare disease, they would definitely force him to leave the village, and this worried him a lot. Feng plucked up his courage. He knocked on the door. A while later, someone finally came out to open the door. The old man gazed at Feng and asked, "What's happened?" Feng looked at the old man with his soulful eyes, then slowly pulled down the cover on his face, revealing the open sores. He then said it was the pumpkin that caused him to be like that. Seeing the ulcers on his face, the old man couldn't help but be shocked. He stood open-mouthed as he found out it was a pumpkin that caused this. The old man then told Fong to come inside his house. Fong was extremely frightened. He pleaded the old man for help. The old man gazed at Fong in disappointment as he had tried to warn him before, yet he didn't listen to him. He told Fong, "Crush the pumpkin into powder, then apply it onto the ulcers. They will heal in 2 hours." Fong was so happy to know that he could be saved at last, but he soon realized that he had thrown the pumpkin into the river this afternoon. The old man grabbed his flashlight, then told Fong to follow him to the forest for the antidote. He knew where to find a pumpkin that was similar to the one Fong had found. The two set out to the forest at midnight. Fong asked the old man, "How could you know so much about that pumpkin?" The man told him a story related to the curse of the pumpkin that had happened to him before. When he was young, Jan, his younger brother, had dealt with the same situation. The younger brother was just like Fong. He accidentally found a pumpkin in the forest, and then happily brought it home and showed it to the villagers. They gathered around him, amazed at the bizarre pumpkin. Jan happily brought it home as a gift for his wife. That night he and his wife had small discussion over what to do with the pumpkin. The married couple and their son gathered around the pumpkin. They decided to bring it to the market and sell it for some money. Suddenly there were knocks outside. The whole family was amazed that it was already late. They didn't expect to have a guest coming that late. A middle-aged man, formally dressed with a briefcase in his hands, came inside. The man introduced his name in a hoarse voice, but there was something unfriendly of him that made the whole family feel wary. The man said he came from the south and offered to buy the pumpkin. Seeing Jan being hesitant about his offer, the man continued by saying that the pumpkin was actually a spiritual one and he was willing to buy it at any price. Jan was thinking for a while. He wondered how the man knew about the pumpkin. The man said it could cure some incurable diseases and was extremely rare. The villagers had told him about the pumpkin and told him to go to Jan's house. Jan asked the man how much money he could pay for the pumpkin. The man raised his 5 fingers and offered to buy the plant at a high price, one that was beyond Jan's imagination. 500,000 won. Jan was shocked. It was a tremendous amount of money to him. The man convinced Jan to sell the pumpkin to him. He said the pumpkin could have a low value to Jan, but to him it was completely the opposite. A scenario of enormous wealth appeared right before the young man's eyes. The man continued by saying that he would help Jan become the richest man in the village if he agreed to sell the pumpkin to him. But Jan had to take him to the forest and show where the pumpkins like this one were. Of course, Jan would earn a high commission for taking the man to the place. Jan didn't hesitate to take the offer. Things happened so smooth that he didn't know what to do except gladly accepting it. But the man wanted to go to the forest right at that moment, which amazed the whole family, as it wasn't a good idea to go to the forest in the middle of the night. Jan refused to take him to the forest as he felt uneasy about leaving his wife and son at home this late. So he suggested to wait until the sun came up and then they would set off. But the man said he couldn't wait. He even offered to raise the price for the pumpkin if Jan agreed to take him to the forest immediately. Now Jan couldn't miss this once-of-a-lifetime opportunity. He agreed with the man's offer and said goodbye to his wife and son. Before leaving for the forest, he reminded them to lock the door and told them that he would be back soon. Then Jan and the man set off their journey. With a worrying expression on her face, the wife told Jan to be careful, as it could be dangerous to go to the forest this late. Jan reassured his wife, saying that he would be back home soon. The woman held her child in her arms and gazed at her husband with anxious eyes. She looked insecure as she sensed something mysterious about the man. The two watched Jan and the strange man walking their way to the forest, until their figure faded into darkness. That night, as the woman had lulled the child to sleep, she was still thinking about her husband. The sun had come up, but Jan hadn't returned. Sensing something bad had happened, she told the villagers about the incident and asked them to help her find Jan. The villagers agreed to go to the forest to look for Jan and the mysterious man. as they also believed there was something dangerous and untrustworthy about the man. So they went to the forest. As they had arrived, they split into smaller groups and went to different directions searching for Jan. The villagers called out his name. Their voices resounded throughout the forest, but there was no answer from him. It was until noon, when everyone had been tired. A group of young men had witnessed a shockingly terrifying scene. Everyone was freaked out to see the scene before their eyes, as it was so brutal and dreadful. As Jan's wife rushed to the scene, she couldn't hold back her tears, bursted out crying loudly. The mysterious man had killed Jan. His body leaned against a tree, mouth opened in fear while the eyes were wide open. The wife rushed to her dead husband, hugged him while crying out in extreme pain. A gloomy atmosphere pervaded the whole forest. The villagers were determined to find the mysterious man to take revenge on him. There was a high chance that he was still in the forest. The villagers separated in smaller groups searching for the man. The intense and furious look was visible on their faces. One villager found a clue about the man. He kept searching. As the man walked for a bit longer, he screamed out loud and fell to the ground as if he had witnessed something truly scary. The other villagers rushed to see what happened. The young man pointed to the place we had just seen the horrors. Everybody was shocked to see the scene before their eyes. The mysterious man had died. He laid next to the tree roots, mouth wide open just like Jan. However, he was still tightly holding the pumpkin that Jan had showed to the villagers. The expression on his face was bizarre yet horrifying. By the look of his face, one could easily tell the man had witnessed something truly scary, while he was keeping the pumpkin with him. Everyone was freaked out. In just a morning, the villagers had found 2 dead bodies in the forest. There was a strong likelihood that the man was killed by the ghosts in the forest. The villagers believed it was a fitting punishment for the man, as he had previously killed Jan in such a brutal manner. As the old man finishing telling his story, Fong asked him, "So what happens after that? Who was the mysterious man?" The old man calmly replied, "He was a grave robber from the south who specialized in trading spooky things." Fong expressed his amazement. "How did you know so well about the pumpkin?" The old man then confessed that he was told about its magical uses by his master, but he never truly believed it. These spooky pumpkins could absorb the souls of dead people. Although they could cure many incurable diseases, they were extremely dangerous. The two then reached the end of the forest. At this moment, Fong realized that they had arrived at the spot where he found out about the pumpkin and the white flower. Both Fong and the old man saw the long roots laying on the ground. The old man reached to his pocket and pulled out a knife. He made a cut to one of the roots. From the cut, a white sap oozed out. The old man told Fong to apply the white sap on his face and the ulcers. The old man gazed at the tree roots. He looked worriedly. He believed if the tree roots were still developing, there would be other pumpkins growing in the forest. Then the man suddenly recalled having a book from his master that illustrated a way of removing these tree roots. He didn't expect that one day he would have to use it. The next morning, Fong went to the old man's house. The two carried bamboo baskets that were loaded with yellow powder, which was made by the old man himself. Then they set out to the forest again. As they arrived at the spot, the old man sprinkled the powder on the tree roots. Oddly, as the powder was sprinkled on them, the roots quickly shrunk and became withered. Fong also followed him to do the same. The tree roots altogether withered and died. The old man then took out an incense burner, then lit 3 incense sticks. He made an altar to honor the souls wandering in his forest and also free them. The atmosphere in the forest suddenly became warmer and fresher. The two went down the mountain after finishing their work. In the forest, the tree roots once again were reborn. They wrapped around the big trunks and sprouted a white flower.